Okay. Thank you very much, Donna. Over to you.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for inviting me to do this talk. So let me get my screen up and we'll get started. Okay, hopefully everybody can see this all right.
Perfect.
Okay, and I'm just, if you don't mind, I'm going to minimize the faces so that I can see my whole screen. Okay, all right. So I'm sure all of you have been glued to the news in the recent days, the situation that's happening in the Ukraine and so on. So whether you are a believer in the United Nations as a system or not, it's really showing us how important it is to get our young people involved in leadership and other practices. And so I think that it's timely for us to look at this kind of a simulation and understand how it works. So let's get started. I've been involved with Model United Nations since about 2010, and my other colleague, Lori Zenik-Nishide, she's been doing this for a quarter of a century. So thanks to collaborating with her, we put together a book, Model United Nations Simulations and English as a Lingua Franca, New Perspectives on Best Practices. And the reason that I'm talking about this book tonight is it's allowing me to organize my thoughts a little bit. And so just to give you an idea where we're going, I'll start with a little introduction to Model UN simulations. And then I'll be looking into 3 of the sections that are in the book so that we can have kind of a taste of the things that were covered and how English as a lingua franca and MUN simulations go together, okay? So let's, contextualize this ELF in MUN simulations. And so in order to understand that, let's get a little bit of background. What is MUN? What is ELF? Why do a MUN event? And how is MUN and ELF related? So I'm going to start with a little video that we might enjoy. And oops, of course, there it is. Enjoy this. It's a little summary of what Model UN is all about. If I can get this to work. There we go.
So what is MUN anyway? Model United Nations, or MUN for short, is a simulation of the real-life UN, United Nations. You take the place of the delegate of a country or an international organization. The aim of the council is to find a solution to the problems you'll be given as a topic before your conference. Just like in the real UN, you'll have the chance to draft resolutions and find a lasting solution to some important issues today, like climate change, the refugee crisis, and more. The aim of the United Nations in real life is to prevent conflicts and promote international cooperation. It's a forum for countries to express their views and make decisions together. To do this, there are numerous organs in the UN, such as the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, the Security Council, the International Court of Justice, and many more. In MUN, you'll get a chance to try to be a part of this. Resolutions are at the heart of MUN. They are a set of rules and guidelines that countries in the world generally follow about a whole range of things, including human rights, carbon emissions, and war. In real life, these are drafted and debated throughout weeks and months, and they require input from a lot of people, like member states, experts, and even NGOs. MUN is all about cooperation, not competition. It's not a race to beat other people. It's about how well you can work together and overcome your differences in opinions. As a delegate of a country, you'll have to play your part by sticking to your foreign policies, but also knowing when you need to compromise with others for the better good.
Okay, so that gives you kind of a general taste. So now that we've talked about what is Model UN, what is ELF? And I'm sure that many of you are, very familiar with English as a lingua franca. And so this refers to a contact language between persons who share neither a common native tongue nor a common national culture, for whom English is the chosen foreign language of communication. And I've highlighted these words on purpose. This is Alan Firth's definition. And so the two key words for ELF is contact and choice. So people are choosing English as a means of communication. It might not be a native language for either person. Among the features of ELF is rather than being characterized by fixed social categories and stable identities, ELF users are agentively involved in the construction of event-specific interactional styles and frameworks. And so what that really means is that if you are participating as an ELF speaker, you really have to go with the flow, and you really have to adjust to all of the different social and cultural aspects of the people that you're interacting with. And I'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but what we found is that when you're in a situation where you've got lots of other language backgrounds for students, they do all sorts of accommodation, and they just try so hard in order to make themselves understood and to understand each other. And so this kind of communicative cooperation is really wonderful to behold. So what about English at the United Nations? So English is one of the official working languages at the United Nations, along with French, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, and Arabic. And it enjoys a special legal status in the sense that English is among the languages that are used as a means of not only communication, but also correspondence, and also to draft official resolutions and legal documents. And so, in other words, the English might be the index document from which the others are going to be translated later. So English has a very strong role in the United Nations. Now, through the use of English and other working languages, diplomats face the challenge of globalization while protecting the interests of their own nations. And so if we break that down a little bit, of course, diplomats are supposed to represent their own nations. And of course, they're supposed to look out for their own countries and the interests of their own countries. But at the same time, they have to form working relationships with each other. They need to find ways to communicate and get through to the, the understanding of people that might have very different needs and different, points of view. The other thing to really pay attention to is that people at the United Nations are predominantly ELF speakers. And this is something that hasn't really been, considered sufficiently, in my view. Most of the time when we think of government agencies and diplomatic work and so on, we see, America, leading the way, and the United Kingdom and so on. And you see a lot of native speakers that, take control of situations and so on. But as soon as you get to the United Nations, you find that English is a working language, and that you've got people with lots of other language backgrounds, and that English is certainly highly, they're highly competent in the language. They might be near native, ability, but they do have this advantage of having another culture behind them. So why should we do Model United Nations events? Well, one thing is to prepare young people to become the leaders of the future. And so when you think about it, the students that you see in your class, whether you believe it or not, someday they might be representing this country. They might be representing this country, in terms of a governmental ministerial post, but they could also be business leaders. I mean, we have no way to predict what kind of leadership roles they might have. And it's really important for us to give them opportunities to practice meeting and interacting with others from around the world, and have a chance to experience negotiating policies in a relatively safe environment where they are grappling with the difficulties of the situation. They're thinking about real problems in the world, but at the same time, you know, they know ultimately it is a simulation, and when they're finished and they've done the best, it's, you know, they can go home satisfied that they did the best they did in the problem-solving situation. So the other thing too is whether they go into this kind of negotiation like work for their future or not, communication skills in a kind of intense competitive environment, sometimes competitive environment, is the reality of what they're going to be facing, no matter what kind of career path they follow. So another reason to do a Model UN event is that participating in a Model UN simulation is CLIL. I mean, it is one of the finest forms of content language integrated learning. So for one thing, the students are expected to do in-depth research on countries and the socio-political issues. And you know, they could be taking just a simple course and looking for the facts, but unless they are gathering this information for the purposes of doing something with it, for the purposes of creating something, then it really doesn't take in the same way. So that's one of the really great things, that they learn a lot about other countries than their own. It also works on their written and spoken language as well. So they have to develop written skills. Now, on the one hand, the written skills, the kinds of documents that they're required to prepare are position papers, and then the drafts of the resolutions that later become resolutions. Those are very stylized. You know, they have a very strict kind of genre, but at the same time, it really, you know, allows the students to focus on becoming precise, concise, you know. For example, in the case of the position paper that they have to prepare before they go to an event, they're expected to, you know, capture all of their information on just 2 pages, okay? And this can be a huge undertaking. They have to really cover a lot of ground in just 2 pages, you know, with a strict, you know, font usage and so on. And then the final reason to do a MUN event is the use of critical thinking and innovation to find creative solutions to real world problems. The whole idea that, you know, when we select the agenda for an event, we try to find things that are timely or things that are going to appeal to, you know, what is in the news now. And our young people, you know, they have lots of ideas and lots of perspectives, and, you know, they need opportunities to flex those creative, critical thinking muscles, and this will give it to them. Now, how is MUN and ELF related? Well, if you've heard the expression community of practice, that's central to this. So a community of practice is a group of people with common interests, and they have a common goal of improving, and they share experiences. And both MUN and ELF do this. In the case of Model UN, you know, there are a common interest in geopolitical matters and whatever the agenda topics are. They have the common goal of doing the research and preparing to negotiate and come up with solutions to problems. And they share the experiences in the sense that Model UN has a particular genre and format and a way of being. And so they are learning how to use language in formal and informal situations in order to, you know, get their points across on a face-to-face, but also in a plenary kind of situation. In terms of ELF being a community of practice, We find that when we get speakers of English as a lingua franca together, there are certain consistent patterns of interaction that they share. And I mentioned earlier on that they do things like they accommodate to each other, which means that, they will start to use each other's verbiage. They will start to speak like the other person. They're very sensitive. They seem to be very sensitive to how each other is talking in order to communicate well. And so these 3 points, mutual engagement, negotiated joint enterprise, and a shared repertoire, these are things that are common to Model UN and ELF. So now we've come to the first section in the book, which is ELF Global Education and Learning in Model United Nations. And so if I just took a quick picture of part of the index to the book. And so I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about chapter 2 and chapter 4. And I think I'll start with chapter 4 because this is a good lead in to the topic that will come. Okay. So chapter 4 was all about a mini-mun that I did with Marina Morbiducci at the La Sapienza University in Rome. And the reason that I want to use this as kind of an exemplar is because model UNs can have a range of sizes. The scope, it's completely scalable event. You could do a model UN that is, each class time for 90 minutes, for 15 weeks in a semester, a little at a time over 15 weeks. You could do it that way. But you could also do it in one afternoon, a very intense one afternoon. In this case, we did it over 2 afternoons. But other really serious Model UN formats could be 3 days, which is, Juiman is 2.5 days, almost 3 days. And then the NMUN simulation in New York, that's a full 5 days. So depending on how much detail you want your students to get into, how many people they're going to negotiate with, how many different meetings you're going to run. I mean, there's a lot of possibility for bigger and bigger organization and events. So let's take a look at this Rome Mini-Mun. So we had 30 students, enrolled for this 2 4-hour afternoon sessions, a total of 8 hours. And the purpose was just to offer a taste of the Model UN simulation. So none of them had experienced MUN before. In order to prepare this event, we had something called MUN in a box. And so actually, Lori Nishide and I have put together something called MUN Kit. It's a brand new collection of materials that are just perfect for doing a small scale Model UN. So this set of materials was used to simulate the Security Council. And the reason we chose Security Council, there's General Assembly, there's lots of organs of the United Nations, lots of different meetings, 20 or 30 different groups that we could be simulating. But the reason we chose the Security Council was the group size was perfect. So if you have, 17 students, you can do the Security Council very easily. And so what we decided is that we would double up and let, some of the students would work in pairs. And the good thing about having 2 students representing one country, if you have one weaker student and one stronger student, then they're going to be helping each other. It also means that when the meeting is going on, they can have divided attention, to what's happening and so on. So anyway, depending on your group size, that's one way that you're going to decide, what you're going to simulate. Okay. The other reason for Security Council is that it generally there are accessible clear and straightforward issues. And so, here's a nice picture from the Security Council in New York. So let's understand a little bit about what the Security Council is, just in case.
United Nations Security Council. Visualized. The UN Security Council is one of the 6 principal organs of the United Nations, alongside with the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship, the International Court of Justice, and the Secretary General. The Security Council was created following the Second World War as an executive power, with the main objective to maintain the peace and security of the international community. The Council membership is limited to 15 states, who are divided in 2 categories. First category is the following Big 5 permanent members: the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, France, the People's Republic of China, and the United States of America, which represents the 5 great powers who won the Second World War. Each of the 5 permanent members has the veto power, which means that 1 negative vote is sufficient to block any resolution of the Council, regardless of the level of international support for the draft. While the second category is composed of 10 non-permanent members, elected by the General Assembly on a regional basis to serve 2-year terms. The decisions of the Council require 9 affirmative votes, which includes the concurring votes of the permanent members. In order to maintain the international legal order, the Council has the power to deal with aggression acts and any threat to the international peace, whether through the peaceful settlement of disputes between states or the direct intervention in enforcing the peace on the ground by sending neutral peacekeeping missions to the conflicted countries. However, when the peaceful solution is not possible, the Council might punish rogue states by imposing international sanctions upon them, or to even authorize the use of military force in order to maintain the peace and security of the international community. In addition, the Council recommends the appointment of the UN Secretary General and the election of the judges for the International Court of Justice. In performing these roles, the Council acts on behalf of the UN, and its decisions are binding upon all states.
Okay. So a second ago, I said 17, if you have 17 students, you do the Security Council. What I meant by that is, of course, there's only 15 countries, but very often I try to get a couple of students to learn how to chair the meeting. Now, in reality, in the Security Council, they usually elect one of the 15 country members to take the role of chair of the meeting. Okay, and a couple of years, in fact, Japan was in charge of chairing the Security Council. But I find that with the students, it's sometimes useful to, develop a separate pair of students to do the chairing and let the other students just focus on representing their country. Okay, so here we have the general flow of any Model UN meeting, not just Security Council. It usually starts with a roll call. And the purpose of the roll call, of course, is to make sure that all the countries are there and in their seats, but also it's to determine how and if they are present and voting. So are they going to take part in votes or not? And when they do vote, are they going to allow themselves to have the power of abstention as well as voting? And so that's the purpose of the roll call, and we would go through all of the countries. We also have setting the agenda. And of course, that would be the time when, of course, in some Model UN simulations, to make them more complex, they have 2 or 3 possible agenda items that the students prepare for, and then they have to argue and select which order they're going to follow the agenda. And of course, whichever of the topics you have prepared the most is the one that you want to be the first one on the list. And so that adds another layer of negotiating about what we're going to talk about during the meeting. Yeah. In simpler Model UN simulations, there is just one agenda, and there's agenda, and it's preset by the teacher. And so everybody knows what they're going to be working on. Okay. I'll talk about the other parts of the flow of the meeting later on. Okay. So let's see, roll call.
Proceed. Sessions begin with roll call. When your delegation is called by the dais, you may say, present, or you may say, present and voting. When a delegate states that he or she is present, they are stating that they are allowing themselves to abstain in voting. When a delegate states that he or she is present in voting, they are stating that they will not abstain.
Okay, so that just gives you, a little look at that. And then we set the agenda. And then once the agenda is set, we're going to be starting what's called the speakers list. And most people who are not familiar with Model UN, the first thing they think about is people standing up and giving speeches. Okay, that's the image of Model UN, standing up and giving speeches. But in fact, and that is something that happens in what's called formal debate. Okay, so formal debate is going to be the time that you get up and you give your formal speech. It's also the time when you might make motions to make decisions about what to do next, so it is the formal meeting itself. But the real meat and real interesting things that happen during a Model UN event is during what's called informal debate, which could be two different forms, moderated caucus or unmoderated caucus. And so we'll, see some examples of that soon too. So first, let's take a look at preparing the 1-minute speech. Now, usually, and this is something that the students can decide as well. They can decide whether the speech time will be 60 seconds, 90 seconds, or even 2 minutes. Most Model UNs will choose between 60 seconds and 90 seconds because you should be able to get most of your points, communicated in that amount of time. And so it's a really great way for the students to get used to expressing themselves quickly. Oops. And so what's neat is that this tells you the contents of what to put in the speech.
And what I want to share with you is a 3-part framework that we teach to students, just 3 parts, to help them write a 1-minute speech for a Model UN conference. And we call that framework hook, point, action. That in your Model UN speech, where you only have 1 minute to speak, you really want to get to the point really quick, and this framework helps you do that. You want to start off your speech with a hook. You want to start off with a question, a quote, a statistic, or a story, something to engage the audience and bring them in, to hook their attention into your speech. You want most of your speech to be about your point. What is the main point of your speech? If it's an opening speech, it's about your country's policy. What is your country's policy on the topic? Stick to one point. You only have a minute, so you might as well say it well. And then you want to end the speech, and this is where most students don't have. They want to end the speech with a call to action. Given your point, what your country wants to do about the topic, what are you trying to tell the committee, the United Nations to do? Call them to action. Get them to do something, to endorse a program, to stand up, to engage something on social media, to get up out of their seats and just bring this issue to attention. Call your audience to action. And if you follow this hook, point, action, it will really improve your.
Okay, and I think he did that in a minute. So writing that 1 minute speech, the hook is a question, a quote, a statistic, and so on. The point, what is your country's policy on the topic? And action, what do you want the Security Council to do about it? And so we've also created, again, even for people who have never done these speeches before, this kind of a fill in the blank thing here, where we tell them these are the things that don't change, that you probably would start with: honorable chair, distinguished delegates, some kind of salutation to start. And then wherever it's yellow on this page, this is where they're going to be putting in their own unique, characteristics of what they want to say. So the name of their country. So Canada is honored to be here today to discuss. And then we talk about what the topic or agenda is. So the situation in Ukraine. Okay. Then first, Canada is deeply concerned about the current crisis in the country. Second, Canada believes that the United Nations should send peacekeeping troops immediately. Canada looks forward to collaborating with other member states on the situation happening in Ukraine at present. Thank you, Honorable Chair and distinguished delegates. So you see that, by having this kind of a framework, students can put something like this together. And what's really neat about something like this is that when the students have this kind of, framed way of creating their speech, they even change their posture when they start to, run these speeches later. And so, by giving them this kind of a framework. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the informal debate and moderated caucus and so on. So first I'm going to talk about unmoderated caucus. In that case, what happens is the delegates, the students, they decide that we're going to break from the formal debate, and they'll set an amount of time. So they could say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever, depending on how long the event is. Let's say 20 minutes for the purpose of, again, getting into working groups or discussing the agenda or whatever, reason. So in the unmoderated caucus, the students will be free to mingle, almost like a cocktail event. They'll be able to walk around and talk to the people they want to talk to. And so I call this the kind of horse trading. What they do is they identify the other country representatives that they really want to talk to and express their opinion with, and maybe get some cooperation. So they're trying to find allies. They're trying to find people that agree with them on the points that they want included in the resolution that they will be writing. And so in this free unmoderated caucus, this is where the real spontaneous communication happens. And this is the communication that I'm really interested in as a researcher. Okay. Now, moderated caucuses are also part of informal debate. And in this case, they are sitting down around the table, and there still is the action of a chair, like a director or chair. Somebody is actually controlling, but rather than having formal speeches and motions, there is this chance for kind of a controlled debate, in a sense, where the chair will make sure that each side of an argument will have the same number of opportunities to, address a topic. Okay. And so the moderated caucus is also a useful thing to do. If any of you have participated in community meetings where Robert's rules are invoked and so on, that's very much like the moderated caucus idea. Okay. So this slide actually I used for the Model UN in Rome. And I said, write your speeches, that would be what their purpose of the unmoderated caucus would be, that they would go off with their partners and maybe, talk about what they would be doing in their speeches. Okay. So why would you bother having these distinct debate types? Well, again, the formal debate is whole group. It's a procedural focus. Time management is the main function. The whole point of having formal debate is to make sure that the overall meeting keeps moving forward, and that we're getting closer and closer to voting on a resolution. The other thing too in the formal debate is that it's, we call it temperature taking on consensus building. So sometimes you get back into the big group together to just get a sense of how many opposing papers are being created, or is everybody on board with one working paper trying to come to a solution. And so the formal debate is the engine in the process of moving from working papers to resolutions. on the other hand, the informal debate, it's smaller groups for caucusing. There's more interaction. The focus is on negotiation and the building of cooperation and gaining an understanding. And it's totally important for having the discussions that will help working paper contributions. So it's during the informal debate situations that you really want your students to feel empowered to really contribute. This is my idea, and I want my idea to be in the final product that we are creating. So for the Rome Mini-Mon, this was the schedule. Day one, we did the orientation roll call. And just to let you know, none of them had ever done any Model UN before. So what I did was I played the role of the chair, but I also played the role of the explainer of the process. And so I had, actually, I had a meat tenderizer hammer. You know what those look like, right? I didn't have a real mallet, a real gavel like they would have in a meeting. And so I said, whenever I pick this up, this gavel, that means that we're back in Model UN mode. And when I put it down, I'm back to teacher mode and I'm explaining what the situation is, okay? So they were really learning all about Model UN while giving things a try. And so all we accomplished in the 4 hours for the first, they wrote their 1-minute speech. I got them all to do their speeches. Typically, we don't get everybody to do speeches the first time. We spread it out, but I had them all do their speeches. They learned how to make motions. And then in the last sort of hour and a half, they looked at what the situation report was, what was the actual situation on the ground, and they started to work in their working groups to come up with solutions. The second day was held in a different room, and the point of that was to go back into the working groups and start writing the draft resolution. And so it was all about composing something that everybody could agree with, and so on. And so that's how we did the 2 days. These are the objectives that I described to the participants, what they would do in 8 hours: role play an ambassador, experience formal debate, use a variety of negotiation strategies, and work collaboratively. And so this was the first day. These are some pictures from the very first day. And so when they got together to prepare their speeches, some of them were sitting in pairs because 2 people were on one country, but I also had them sitting in loosely organized working groups because I wanted them to start sounding out their ideas with other countries and get a chance to do that early in the thing. The second day, we had the great opportunity to use the rector of the University of Rome's office meeting room. And so it was such an honor, and the students knew that they were coming. Now, not everybody, but some of them, the second day they came dressed up, right? Because they felt, the honor of being in that space, this magnificent table and so on. And so they really comported themselves totally differently the second day. So what are the research angles? Well, one of the areas of research that, of course, I'm interested in is collecting a Model UN corpus of speech. And, that's something I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. There are other studies, of course, effect studies like, how the language development happens, proficiency building, motivation, willingness to communicate. Just offhand, I can say that in terms of proficiency building, when the students participate in something like JUIMON or ENMON, one of the big intensive simulations, that moves them ahead in terms of their proficiency as if they went for a 3-month study abroad. I mean, it really pushes their proficiency building. And so then other kinds of research that we look at is communication training in English as an international language for linguistically naive native speakers. So I might talk about that a little bit later as well, because It might come as a surprise and a shock to some of you, but native speakers are not always the best communicators, particularly when consensus building is required. And so we've had situations in Model UNs where the native speakers have actually been, how can I say this? Less than cooperative, and they've been in some cases, depending on which event you're at, very competitive events. Some of the professors actually train their native speakers to weaponize the use of language, in a sense, to interrupt and to hold the floor and do all sorts of things to make it very hard for people to participate. And so that's another part of what we've had to do with our students, is make sure that our students are ready with strategies to take back the floor and to continue to be able to participate. So we don't want our Japanese students to go to New York and stand on the side of the wall. We want them to get right in there swinging and, become leaders. And so far it's been happening quite well. So why would we want to compile a corpus of MUN English, right? Well, there is a general need for specialized corpora of all kinds. And it's only been, in the recent past 20 years or so that spoken corpora have been collected on any kind of scale. And partly it's because, there wasn't the kind of technology available to do it, okay? And it allows us glimpses into unaccounted for communities of practice. The specific need for a Model UN corpus is because a corpora of spoken diplomatic language is largely unavailable. Right now, you can examine the written documents of the Model UN or of the United Nations itself, okay? And there is an archive of recorded speeches and so on, but that's very formal language. What we don't get in diplomatic language is, of course, the backroom talking, the negotiation that happens because, there's security issues, right? So the Model UN, since it's dominated by ELF speakers, and the UN is as well, we really need this kind of a corpus to take a look at how people are dealing with negotiating with each other. And virtually no research, linguistic or otherwise, has been done on features inherent in these interactions. So currently, we've got a long way to go in collecting this corpus. The ultimate goal, of course, is a large analyzable corpus, and we have collected about 100 hours of interactions, but any of you who have done transcriptions and so on, that for every hour of interaction, there's hundreds of hours of transcription that's required. So only a limited portion has been transcribed so far, but we're slowly working our way through it. So right now, all that we can do are limited scale qualitative analyses, and I've already published 2 of these. One has been looking at the repair strategies in Model UN Corpus of English, and that's coming out in TESOL Italy journal soon. And another one looking at the non-standard morphosyntactic features of the Model UN corpus. And what's interesting there is that my reason for looking at the non-standard syntactic features is I wanted to see if this Model UN, ELF was resembling other ELF that has been collected. So Andy Kirkpatrick has collected his Asian corpus of English, and Barbara Seidelhofer has collected Voice, the Vienna Oxford International Corpus of English. And so I wanted to see if this mini corpus so far is, capturing some of the same kind of, features. Okay, now on to part 2. Now I just want to keep track of our time. How are we doing, Jackie?
We are doing fine. Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Okay. So the second section here, again, this is not going to be as long as the first section. I just wanted to, talk a little bit about what we've been doing and how we've been managing for the past 2 years with the COVID pandemic, because obviously, You can't get thousands of students together in a small room to do negotiation. And so how we've been doing that. And that ties in with the use of, technology in MUNs in general. So when we're preparing for a Model UN event, no matter how big or small the event is, there's going to be weeks of preparation involved, where they have to research their country, the profile of the country, policies, and all these things. They have to start developing their proposals and arguments and, think ahead about the kinds of things they're going to be, trying to push for. Also, if you've got a group of students representing one country and going to a Model UN event, and they're all going to be going off into different meetings, it's still good for them to get a sense of team building, because they can come back at the end of the day. We always have a debriefing session at the end of each day, and they talk about what things they were able to, to do and what their goals for the next day are, and so on. And it's really great for them to have other people to bounce ideas off and to cheer them up. If the very first day is always the hardest, right? And also just practice talking about the topics to develop spontaneity and fluency. So they really need buddies to talk to. Okay, so all of those weeks of preparation. Then they go to the event, which I made it look like an explosion, because it is like that for the students. And then after we get back from the event, we have a post-event debriefing and reflection, because it's really important afterwards for them to really have a chance to talk about what were they able to do, what were they not able to do. If they have a chance to do this again, what would they do it, differently, and so on. So that's the general flow. Now,
Donna,
yeah.
Sorry, a question just come into the chat, and I thought I'd pass it along right quick. Was it 100 hours interaction of members or members to public institution?
You mean in the corpus that we've collected?
Or no? I'm not sure. That's all that's written here. The answers come back, yes.
Whoever it is that asked the question, maybe if you want to turn your mic on and just ask the question correct.
Oh, Izati, are you there? Oh, sorry.
Okay.
The microphone is not possible, but they typed in yes to your question.
Okay. And so you see the corpus, I've been trying to collect it from the unmoderated caucusing, where, and so this is something that I would have to spend some real time to explain. The students had to actually wear little spy cams. So around their neck, they're going to be wearing a spy cam so that they can record what they're saying and what the person that they're talking to is saying. And that's how we've been collecting this, because I'm not interested in the speeches. I'm not, interested in the formal aspects. I'm really looking at the spontaneous interactions. And we've tried all sorts of other things. We've had stationary cameras planted all around, but the sound quality is usually the problem. We get to see the faces, but then we can't match up the voices, right? Other times, what we've done is at various times in the event, when they are doing the document writing, you have this wonderful scene where you've got a computer and you've got 5 people huddled around the computer looking at the screen, and they're all talking with each other and somebody's typing. Well, that's a great opportunity, because then I can put a camera and I can put my Bluetooth, microphone kind of close. And I not only can pick up everything, but I can see who's talking. Yeah. But we have to be so careful to be unobtrusive, and so they've gotten used to us wandering around, and we try to wear, really, unnoticeable clothing and skulk around the, but we can't interrupt anything, right? So it's been a really tough time to collect this data, never mind transcriptions. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Izati, was that okay? Did you have any follow-up questions? Oh, perfect. They said so.
Okay.
I'll let you continue. Thanks very much for the
Okay.
question, Izati.
Okay, so what I'm looking at here is that when we're doing the preparation for the MUN event, and if we're lucky enough to be able to do it as part of a class, we operate like a flipped classroom. And so what's happening is a lot of work is done outside of the class, okay? So the students are basically given an assignment, or, you know, they have to do things like do their research, do their collecting of ideas. They might work outside of the classroom on Zoom. Sometimes the faculty members will mentor with them, or we also have a wonderful system where any student that has done a MUN event, from the second and third time on, they come back as student mentors. Okay. And so in order to pay back for the fact that they've been able to go and do an event, and, you know, the school does, you know, finance some aspects of their travel, they have to agree to come back and give back to the community. Okay. And so it's really neat that you end up having all of these sort of student mentors involved. Okay. So outside of the class, they're doing all of this stuff. And then we come into the class to participate in some kind of a structured activity. And so the structured activity could be, you know, one week it could be, okay, share with everybody what your policy suggestions are. You know, you have to give a little preamble about what your country is and what is the situation and what are you proposing. And so they just have to get used to talking about it with each other. Yeah. So that might be one of the structured activities they have in the class. So the whole purpose of the class is interaction. But they have to do a lot of work outside of the class before they can come. And so at the end of the class, we set a new task before the next class, and they go out and they do their research, writing, mentoring, you know, outside the class, and then come back in for another structured activity. Okay. And so here's an example of mentoring by Skype. So we had, you know, of course, during the pandemic, we couldn't do much of this, you know, together anyway. Even our class simulations we had to do on Zoom. And by the way, there were lots of different possible platforms to use. We've used variations on Zoom, but we also use something called Discord. I don't know how many of you have used Discord, and also a platform called Gatherly as well. And so there's lots of, you know, good adaptations that are possible to keep doing this. I will say, though, nothing beats face-to-face, even if it's mask to mask. Okay. So anyway, to give you an idea, if in our school, even though it is a class, we don't meet every week. What we do is we have, before the event, we're going to have 4 or 5 class meetings, 4 or 5 sessions. And usually they are on Saturday for half a day, you know, so maybe 4.5 hours on a Saturday. So once a month or once every 3 weeks or whatever. And then we have the event, and then we have a final session after we get back from the event. Okay. And so that's how we do the preparation. So first there's interviewing and screening and so on to, you know, make sure that we choose the right students to be involved. And there's 5 3-hour class sessions. And again, you know, this is the same stuff that I had on the previous slide. Okay. So here is just a, you know, short summary of the kinds of things that happen in each of the sessions. So session 1, self-introductions, filling out country profiles, you know, just the basic, get used to practicing how to do motions and the, you know, just the bare bones. Okay. Then they do their research. And then session 2, they share their research and they do Q&A. And they get used to, you know, the flow of the meeting and so on. Session 3, they have practice writing a working paper because they have to be familiar with, you know, we generally use Google, you know, use Google writing tools and in order to do this. And then session 4, they meet in their regional and committee blocks to get peer feedback and to brainstorm some more before going to the event. And then when they come back from the event, we do a debriefing, reflection, evaluation. So here, this is an example of one schedule overview that was done during COVID, a 5-week schedule. So what would happen when? And so there was an opening formal session on May 25th and 30th. And then all these other ones were done offline, and then it was not until the online conference on June 28th when they had a full day on Gatherly to do their final work. And so, these are just some snapshots of the various things. They had a handbook to, train them how to use all of this stuff in order to survive the situation. And I'll just play this. This is, I'll just show you so you can see some of the scenes from the online event.
Sometimes we need to use
So our team of chairs, they had to be in person to manage everything while the other students were online.
Education for women.
Exclusive on capacity building.
Okay, so if you want to watch this later, I can go back. Okay, so let me try and finish section 3 and then we'll be done. So we're really fortunate to have within our, sort of circle of faculty associates, Michiko Kuroda. She was actually worked for the UN, and during the East Timor crisis, she was one of the lead negotiators there. And so Michiko has taught us so much, not only about the United Nations and negotiation itself and, approaches to develop negotiation among students, but also she's become a really masterful mentor for her own students. She's at Mercy College in New York. And so she, wrote a really great chapter, and I wish that we could spend more time talking about that. And then also Thomas Weiler in Germany. He talked about preparing your team for Model UN, the best case scenario. And he has been preparing teams to go to Model UNs for, 25 or more years. And he has some, really great suggestions. So here's just some snapshots so you can enjoy, taking a look, practicing the meeting procedure, points of order, and so on. The students have to get used to lifting their placards high quickly, in order to get the attention of the chair of the meeting, the dais. Here they're practicing formal debate, and we also encourage them even when they come for the Saturday practice sessions, not even just the Model UN themselves. When they come to class, they should dress up. And what's really interesting is that once they get rid of the blue jeans and they put on the suit jackets, they are different. They change. And so we ask them to do that. They also practice informal debate and unmoderated caucusing so that they get a sense of it before they're facing the complete strangers at the main event. Also, we let them have opportunities to, use all sorts of whiteboards and talk about their policies. And here, I think this group is trying to come up with things that they would want to put in a working paper. And so they're just, jotting down ideas and trying to figure out how things go together. Also, before going off to the event, we do get them to practice the flow of the meeting just so that they know what to expect. There are lots of resources available online. So if you go to the United Nations website, never mind, you can, look at all of these libraries. The CIA World Factbook is like our Bible. It's one of the first go-to places to find out about countries. I'm so grateful that the United States puts money into collecting a factual and reliable set of information. And so those are all available as well. There's official government web pages, voting records, lots of different things to choose from here. If you're interested in any of these things, let me know. I can always send some of these links along. Again, if you're interested in any of the research that Lori and I have done, please contact me as well. We're going to be having another Juiman coming up this year. It's going to be in Okayama at Notre Dame Seishin University. It will be 24th of June to the 26th. It will be face-to-face, God willing. And so if you're interested in having your students join, please consider doing it. And thank you. And I'll take some questions now.
Oh, thank you very much, Donna. That was amazing. You fit in a lot of information in an hour. Thank you.
I'm
very,
so
very
sorry
much.
that I had to rush through so many things.
Oh, no. It was great. Great. Right. So I'll be quiet. And if you have questions, you can raise your hand or just turn on your mic and speak. That's fine as well. But yeah. Please.
And if there's any things on the chat that you want to just verbalize, Jackie, that would be great. Okay.
Good. Edward's raised his hand. On you go, Edward, please.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for that presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have two questions, actually, if it's all right to ask. The United Nations recently published a MUN guidebook.
Yes.
And that guidebook kind of takes aim at some of the practices that MUNs go through. And you had mentioned Robert's rules. They especially go after, the use of motions, the use of voting, as well as the power of the chair at an MUN event.
Right.
And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. And
so I think, I totally understand where they're coming from and why they're trying to do it. Okay. Because, when as much as possible, it's good for us to be emulating what the actual practices are. Okay. The constraints that we're facing are as follows. Some of them are pedagogical constraints. Our students are not diplomats, right? So they need a lot of support for certain things. And so, for example, in the real United Nations, as it said in the little video, these negotiations can take place over months, right? And they are little meetings in restaurants, little meetings in corner offices. They are, chats going down the hallway. They're not, the same kind of intensive 3-4 day thing that we have to do. Yeah. So as a result, there isn't sort of the need for certain, the Model UN simulations tend to have more structure in terms of we're going to do this now, and then we're going to do that next, and then we're going to do something else. And that's kind of just a pedagogical necessity. Yeah. So, so to give you even a better example, in the case of Juiman, we don't give the students a chance to decide which topic they're going to do. We choose a topic, an agenda for them. We don't set them free to go looking for their own alliances, which is what would happen, where the diplomats would just, make their own personal contacts and start, working together, building consensus themselves, right? And that happens in NMUN in New York, okay? But in Juiman, because the students just are not ready for that much flexibility, we put them into regional groups, or, we'll put them in pre-designed groups that we think probably have common interests. So we kind of shorten that, so that's one thing. Okay. Now, as far as the rules of, the meetings and that kind of thing as well go, yes, there's room for us to change, some of the procedural matters. And so that's going to happen. But at the same time, we still need to keep these events engaging and compelling, right? And so, so some of the changes that are being suggested by people who are not educators and don't understand the kind of classroom culture that that you have to kind of keep people engaged. You know what I mean? So we're trying to find some kind of a balance between authenticity, of course, as much as possible, but also something that, students will feel a sense of structure and be able to get through everything in a timely manner. So, it's an ongoing project. And we're always going to these different workshops and, figuring out what kind of things we can bring to this particular group, knowing the group's capabilities and so on. So, yeah. And I think it's really a good idea for different model UNs to have different approaches, because depending on who the students are that you're working with, you can't have it at such a level that they can't engage, that they can't be involved, and so if you sacrifice a certain amount of the authenticity, so be it. It's better for them to do something, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but there's a lot of room to fix things up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely, I appreciate that answer very much.
Yeah, and so we're all working on it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a second question. I think other people want to ask questions too, so I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to raise your hand again, we'll get you in the queue. But RW has raised his hand. RW has raised his hand.
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly?
Sure can.
Perfect.
Okay. I just want to say, first of all, Donna, thank you very much. It was an absolutely wonderful speech, wonderful presentation. I'm actually involved with UN-related studies at Reitaku University.
Great.
We've sent students to the Washington MUN on a number of occasions. And one there's a couple of questions that are related to that. The first one is, you send your students to the New York MUN.
Right.
Is that a yearly thing? Are you doing that every year?
Yes, every year. And so it usually happens during the Easter break in the United States. And so this year, it's actually starting from the 2nd of April. And so there's two different, sessions to go to. You can go to A or B. A in this year is from the 2nd of April till the 7th or 8th, I think. And then there's another 1 week after that. Okay. Mm-hmm. The reason they have to divide it up like that is that about 5,000 students go, and the hotels cannot manage everybody all at once. So they actually divide it into two different, sessions. And so we usually go the first one, because as much as possible, we want to do it in March whenever we can. This year is really crazy because everything's in April. And so sometimes we, just give up if it's in April, because our budgeting only goes till March, right? So it's really a mess, right? The reason that we like to go to the one in New York, a couple of reasons. First, it's huge. It's good for the students to have that experience where there's 22 or 23 different simultaneous meetings going on. And so in order to represent a country, you have to have at least 26 students. And so what we often do is we have partners in Germany where they take care of part of the meetings and we take care. So as long as we have a total of 26 students, we can represent a country. Yeah.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and smaller countries that don't have meetings, don't have people in every meeting, you can have fewer students, right? A smaller team. Yeah.
We always represent one country when we've sent students to Washington. A couple of years ago, we represented Argentina. A year before that, we represented Syria. Are you representing more than one country then?
No. We only represent one country, but there's so many different meetings to go to.
Yeah.
And so this year, let's see, we're representing Pakistan. And so, of course, we have to have people in, the General Assembly. We have to have them in ECOSOC. There's all these different places that we have to send people, right? And, and then what's really one of the greatest things afterwards is that we always have the debriefings with our German counterpart students. So we all gather in a big room together and beef about what happened all day, right? So we hear from them. That happens at about 11 o'clock at night, by the time the day is over. The other thing is that we always arrange for permanent mission, debriefings. And so we get our students in and they meet the real UN representatives for whatever country they're, representing. So that's the beauty of going to New York.
It sounds fantastic. Incredibly good.
And then always the closing ceremony, the very final session with voting is done in the actual GA.
Yeah.
And wow. So it's not that just that you go on the tour and see it, you go and sit in the actual chairs,
Yeah, it's interesting because our university has this connection with Washington. I don't know how it occurred. We started sending
Washington's
students.
great too.
Have you ever participated?
I've not personally, but our students have gone, and my other colleagues, because we just can't go to all of them. Yeah. I've wanted to go to Washington for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when I've spoken to some of the American delegates there who also participate in New York, and they say it's got obviously a different atmosphere, but New York is something else. It's completely
it's more the Olympics.
More hectic. Yeah. And one other question, if I may, you mentioned Gavali. I've had experience with Gavali with the Washington DC conference a couple of years ago. Right. You're using Gavali with your students in Japan,
we were using it when we were doing Juiman.
Okay. All right. I don't know very much about you.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Because it's too expensive for casual use.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. So if anybody else has a question, please raise your hand. But in the meantime, there's a couple of questions in the chat that I wanted to read off to you, if that's okay. Jackson's asked the term linguistically naive native speaker. Thought that was very interesting. And what would your definition be? And any reference?
This is my way to, to be nice rather than to say asshole. Okay. So, these are the people that will come to a meeting and they are not trying to accommodate. They are not trying to listen. They're not trying to cooperate. Now, it could be because they're, again, naive and they don't realize what they're doing. But sometimes it's because they want to control the situation. So whichever way, I'd rather err on the side of thinking, well, they really don't mean to be as obnoxious as they are. Yeah. Okay. And so we've even done things like come up with native speaker training. And what we do is, and I've written a paper about this, where we will expose the native speaker to a situation that is reminiscent of what they are doing to the ELF speaker. And so they'll have the Japanese students will suddenly switch into a language that the native speaker doesn't know and just talk over them in a different language. And then, they're saying, well, wait a minute, I don't know what you're saying, And so they're really getting this kind of sensitivity training. I don't know what you would call this, but they're really getting a taste of their own medicine. So we've got a whole series of these things, and we try to get people to do this training together. So part of it is so that our students can feel a little bit more empowered, and also for, you know, some of our exchange students that come and join JUIMAN, for example, we have, you know, exchange students from all over the world. They get a sense of, you know, how to participate well too.
Oh, nice. Jackson, is that good?
I saw Jackson showing a laughing emoji just
okay.
now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Okay. And then there's one more question in the chat as well from Christine. This has been very interesting. Thank you very much, Donna. And I was wondering, do you think this is adaptable to younger children, like upper elementary to junior high, that don't have the linguistic ability to do this in English,
Right.
as a way to give them opportunities to engage in discussions on current events?
I think it's absolutely important to do some form of this, no matter what the age is, because you know, even the chance for a very structured public speaking, I don't think that it's too soon to get students to start. The idea of maybe having a meeting where there is some sense where the students are somewhat in control of what gets said and when it's said, but there is a structure. I think that that's a good thing too. This instilling the idea of civic mindedness, and that we all have a voice and that our voices need to be heard. I think that, you know, it's good for us to put situations for our students that they can try this out. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Christine, did you have follow-up questions? Oh, thank you. She said, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Lovely,
and,
lovely.
you know, again, you know, stay in touch, because we really want it. We've developed things for high school students, and they're lots of fun to do it. Junior high as well. For elementary school students, you know, I haven't personally been thinking about it very much, but, you know, with the SDGs and so on, there's so many topics that are worth talking about. And again, you know, getting them to do it in a cooperative environment. I mean, that's what we're doing anyway, right? So.
Right. Good. Yeah, thank you very much, Christine, for the question. Lovely, lovely. Let's see. Edward, you said you had another question as well before when we were talking with you.
Yeah, sure. If no one else has a question.
No other hands so far.
Okay.
So
okay. I think you mentioned this briefly, where participants in MUN have used it as a way to decide on a career path, like you know, diplomacy or whatnot. And I think two of my high school students who participated in MUN this past year, one had decided to go into law for the purpose of international diplomacy, another one specifically wanting to go into diplomacy.
Right.
And we're choosing universities as a result of that, which is, you know, terrific. Right. But I'm wondering, is there actually any data or research out there that actually shows people making decisions because of participating in events like this? And even more so, is there like a societal, you know, is there anything that actually shows it contributing to society?
I think that mostly there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but when I was saying that there's hardly any research on Model UN interactions, in fact, there's not a lot of research of the kind that you're suggesting either. So those of us who are involved, we do, you know, check out and we say, oh, you know, the people that are at the Japan Permanent Mission in New York, for example, we ask how many of you did JMUN, you know, when you were in college, and almost all of them have the experience. You see, so there seems to be people that do end up going into public life do have this. Now, I'm not saying it's causality, you know, correlation is not causality, right? But I don't think there's been enough real systematic collection of this kind of information. And so, you know, Michael Eaton and of the NMUN group, I've talked to him a number of times, and, you know, they've got so many archives from years gone by of participants and so on. I said, you know, I would just love to take a look and see if we could find the life paths of people that participated. Now, I don't know, you know, is it easier to start with people in positions and ask them, did they do MUN, or do you go to the archive list and you know, try and track down everybody? I don't know which way we, you know, could possibly do it. Even starting with some good surveys, good questionnaires would be a nice thing to do. But I think that the general, you know, people are going into business, they're going into consultancies, they're going into things where they're using these kinds of negotiation skills. So not necessarily, you know, related to, you know, ministries of foreign affairs or anything like that. Right. But even from among our students, we've had students, you know, one ended up working for MOFA in Turkmenistan. And I mean, you know, we've had kids decide on that, you know, path, and they wouldn't have done it if they hadn't been in Model UN. So there just hasn't been enough, you know, concrete research yet. So
yeah,
do it. Do it, Edward.
That's something I've been searching for a while, and this all came out of a report in 2015 from Japan's business lobbying group,
right?
Kanden or something like that. And they pretty much threw out a call to action to universities saying that we don't have enough globally minded people to allow Japan to compete in the global economy at this point.
Right.
And so, yeah, so it's just the question.
And so this would be the answer, and say, okay,
that's what I'm thinking.
If we say to the business companies, ask for Model UN, you know, ask them if they're in Model UN, and it will wash back, you know, yeah. And it'll make a huge difference in the kind of candidates they get.
Right. No, thank you.
Great idea, though.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edward. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? We've had lots of thank yous and lovely presentation mentions in the chat. Any other questions that you'd like to ask of Donna this evening? Nice. Okay. Well, with that then, I'd like to say thank you very, very much, Donna, for joining us tonight and sharing your wealth of information and experience with us. It's been really
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me, and it was really nice to meet all of you. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you as well for your great questions. We got even more information out of her, so thank you very much for that.
Right, and next time in person.
Yes, yes. I think we're all looking forward to that after a very long hiatus. So, all right. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe and warm. Enjoy the sunshine tomorrow.
Yeah, all the best.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.